Welcome back, you filthy exiles. So, a lot of people have been putting a lot of requests in the comments to get an update on the Vortex Occultist Giga-tank build that I built for 3.16 and how it will apply for 3.17. So, just maybe one thing to coin out here is that there is somewhat of a buff coming to the Giga-tank. To Vortex and Cold Snap. In the 3.17 patch notes, as well as the self-cast buffing that's occurring. So it is somewhat buffed, which is really good. That being said, the tree that I've got, and I'll provide two POBs in the description for this one, but I'll talk through the first one, which is more sort of League starter centric and more health based, as opposed to being low life based. I had to cut the video for a tick there. I got a little bit distracted. So there is a bit of a strength, dexterity, and an intelligence problem here, which we can simply solve by gearing out our rings a little bit better. But I'll leave you guys to sort of work with that. This is just a very loose sort of build starter sort of guide to get you sort of into Vortex and guide you through the path of it. So a couple of notes that I've got here, and I'll probably zoom up on the screen. Actually, we can probably zoom up a little bit here. Let's zoom up. Yeah. Thank you, OBS. Okay, so a couple of things just to note. Early leveling with Vortex. So, and we'll go into the tree very shortly, but I'll talk you through some things just to understand. So, Vortex, you'll level up from pretty much level 1 straight away with the with the Witch as a Freezing Pulse character. You'll do this until about Act 3, and you'll get to about level 28 to 32. And then you will actually pick up the Vortex gem from Clarissa, I think it is, in Act 3. Is it Act Clarissa? Yeah, I think it's Clarissa in Act 3. And then pretty much from there, what you'll do is map Vortex to your move button, and it's from there. It's so simple. You're just basically just powering through. So take home early leveling, go straight to Freezing Pulse, level Freezing Pulse up as you go up through to Act 3, and then switch to Vortex straight away. Now you can run that with Creeping Frost. That's going to increase your cold dot even further. And there are versions of this build with Creeping Frost. There's actually versions with Spellslinger Creeping Frost, which works quite well, even though Spellslinger is getting nerfed for 3.17. I think it's by like 33% damage reduction to the skill. You can set it up with Frenzy and then basically shoot little projectiles out of your wand for Frenzy to generate Frenzy charges. And then basically also have it shoot Creeping Frost and even, I think it's Winter Orb. Maybe not, not Winter Orb, Frostbolt, sorry. You can even get it to do Frostbolt at the same time, which then synergizes with Vortex. So entirely up to you how you do it, but early leveling, Act 3, get Vortex, map to your move button, Bob's your uncle, straight away. When you're on bosses, map it to Q and then just hold it down and sit on the boss. This character is going to be so tanky that you won't really need to worry about it. At least damage as you're leveling up, you'll be a Chad about it. So I've set out 3 particular trees, and we'll talk about that very soon. This particular build also is max block, high armor, high resistance or max resistance. Now it doesn't have a lot of chaos resist, and that really depends on gearing. But it is quite chunky from just a really cheap sort of iteration of the build. And it does have 8k EHP, so that EHP refers to energy shield or energy shield and HP. So it's got about 3000 energy shield and 5000, a little bit over 5000 HP, which makes it pretty tanky, especially for a very league start sort of build. Now, itemization, I would recommend as soon as you've worked through this build, you've got the gear sitting to one side, look to basically switching into the Giga-tank, the CI variation, or we should write CI variant, if you basically want to be unkillable. Now, the sort of trade-offs of this build, and for people who don't want to hear this, the damage is not the highest. The trade-off of having complete and absolute survivability is that it's not as tanky, unfortunately. It's not as DPS-y, unfortunately. Now, if you do want a more DPS-based build, I would recommend doing the low-life variant, and I'll actually put a link to a tree or a POB in the description for a low-life variation as well for this. So it's really dependent on what you want to do and what you want to play. Low life is going to use Prism Guardian and Chevrons. Now, depending on how you look at that, some people will be like, that's really expensive to get by, the end of the first week. Other people will be like, oh, that's a piece of piece of cake. They get a Presence of Triula really easily, some Syntrex, and a Prism Guardian and a Shavs with no sweat at all, and a Vortex. Entirely up to you. How do you look at building this character out? I'm not going to tell you how to play the game. I'm just here to provide some guidance. Now, the alternative, the Giga-tank build, which is CI, does about 1.1.3 million dot, depending on, skill gem levels, if you've got awakened gems, if you've leveled everything up, and, what trade-offs you've made in the tree to up cold damage and dot. That bearing in mind too, there is a reasonable increase to Vortex, as at least the cold damage is moving up to a high point of 1.8 thousand from 1.25 thousand cold damage, while dot is pretty much staying the same. Now, the impact of that, I'm not too sure as to how that's going to impact Vortex as an overall. I would assume it's going to kill enemies quicker though. That's pretty much my go-to on that one. So, yeah, that's pretty much the sort of gist of this build, talking through early leveling, defenses, and everything else, instead of going into like this huge 20-minute guide about talking about the damage layers or the defense layers or whatever. It's literally that simple and doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. Okay, so pretty much with the tree, you'll see in the actual POB, there are 3 variations of the tree: level 30, level 69, and level 91. This pretty much just branches out and shows you where to go. Now, this particular early League starter build has no cluster jewels whatsoever. Cluster jewels will make this build more powerful, but it'll also mean defense trade-offs potentially. Potentially, I say that because you can gear up the cluster jewels and get cluster jewels that will assist in defensiveness. Now, entirely up to you how you do that. If you want to change this, if you want to look at another build and hybridize between builds, it's usually the best way to get the best blend of a build that works for you. In my case, this build works for me. So pretty much by level 30, you want to pick up all of these nodes. You really want to get up to this acrimony, however you pronounce that. I can't pronounce half the shit in this game. And then basically start stacking up HP. So, we're at about 200k dot with the gearing that we've got in the build, and I'll show you the gearing in the next section and the gem setups after that. And like 10.5k armor. So this is like really high armor. Resistances sort of start to move up, and you're doing about good sum of damage. Now that's assuming you even had that gear at the start, but the gear will still, whatever you're going to have is going to scale up reasonably. Then you move up to level 69. I know, funny reference there. Get your minds out of the gutter, guys. And then you got to branch out and pick up more of these nodes here, just to basically get your survivability up. And then you got to branch out, pick up this large area, sort of cold mastery set of nodes up here. This is going to increase your cold dot even further. And then basically you're going to move down, pick up your sovereignty, which is going to assist in basically getting your mana reservation down. Move down, pick up this Divine Judgment, which is a significant node on this build, and then move into Glancing Blows and Sanctuary, and this will get you to the low life component of the build. Then we'll get to level 91, and pretty much we're just going to finish up the build and pick up all the Snowforge nodes, Written in Blood, Growth and Decay, and anything else, Soul Thief, resourcefulness, everything else that's going to give you survivability at the end of the day, but also give you more ailment damage ultimately. And we'll just move the screen around again. There we go. Sort of doing this a little bit more sort of blasé than usual. All right, there we go. We're back into it. So that's pretty much it for like your trees, and this is all in the POB in the description. This will be the leveling POB that I'll put in the description. So your endpoint, you get to about 550,000 DPS. Some people are going to say, oh, that's not good enough, rah, rah, rah. My response to you would be, come on, get over yourself. This build is not meant for like 2-second boss kills. This build is meant for battles of attrition. You may take a little longer to kill something, but you know what? You're not going to rip every 5 seconds, and that's a trade-off. You either want to play the build where you're not going to rip, and in particular with the new bosses and doing Maven and things like that, this build is going to be relatively forgiving, even with the current setup that it's in. Or you're going to play a glass cannon build and get fucked over every 2 seconds, but you know, you'll kill the boss on that last portal, hopefully. So it's entirely up to you. You know, different players, different ways they want to play. I know this build will work with less experienced players, where you don't have to basically telegraph boss fights and things like that. And in fact, you know, people who have probably never killed the end game bosses, this build is going to get you there ultimately. So alternatively, you could go and try and build a 2-shot build, but you know, if you don't know how to play a 2-shot build, or you know, a high, what do they say, TTK build, time to kill, which I hate that reference, then be my guest. But if you're not as experienced in the game, play this build. This is going to do you a lot more in helping you sort of develop your knowledge of the game and understanding some more complicated more complicated mechanics, like, you know, cold dot, for example. Seems like it's not complicated, but it can be. So for the itemization in this build, we'll just zoom it in again. Ooh, I like that. So pretty much you're just looking at, in this case, I haven't put a +1 wand on this. This is just like any old wand that you can, or it's not any old wand, but it's not the wand that you would want in this build. So generally you want to get a +2 wand with like +2 to cold skill gems and spell, +1 to cold skill gems and +1 to all spell gems. Or yeah, I don't think you can get intelligence on your wand, but if you could, you know, do it. So pretty much you want to get that type of wand, but this is more or less the type of wand that you're going to get at the start of the game or throughout, you know, mapping. So this is more realistic and tuned into mapping and newer players. Now 550k, while that sounds like it's not a lot, based on people who have played endgame like myself, you know, 550k is a pretty low point. But that being said, for a newer player and also taking it into bosses, I'm not entirely sure what the new endgame bosses HP is going to be like, but it should scale pretty well, and that should be pretty forgiving and acceptable of a level of DPS, especially with the type of gear that's in this build currently as it is. So second to that, we're running an Aegis Aurora. Like, that's literally my favorite shield, and it'll help you build into the Giga-tank variant where you basically can't die or almost can't die, and you can face tank bosses for days. The biggest advantage of the Aegis Aurora, that 2% energy shield replenished when of armor. So this is a high armor build. 2% of the armor is replenished as energy shield for when you block. This is a glancing blow max block character, which means of your 3,000 energy shield, unless you're getting slapped by chaos, you're going to be able to take some big hits. One way you could sort of get around that is just run a Shavs as your chest armor, or a Solaris Lorica as a couple of options, but entirely up to you what you want to do. They'll help you sort of mitigate chaos damage problem, but there are other trade-offs in running those pieces of armor, such as, you know, less defensiveness than the armor that's in here, and the armor that's in here is actually pretty decent. Crown of the Inward Eye, if you can't get a good, or if you can't get a Crown of the Inward Eye, then a really good Hubris Circlet's going to do the job. Obviously, with the changes to crafting, there's, you know, we're going to see some real significant changes. This area, though, I'm not sure if that applies to helmets yet. Someone can probably prove me wrong, but I just like using Crown of the Inward Eye because I think it's pretty much one of the best helmets in the game. And to be honest with you, it's still going to be obtainable because we'll be farming Cyrus anyway, so probably in the first week, people will start farming this. Usually it takes like 2 days for some crazy mofo to get to, or like 1 day for some crazy mofo to get to like T16 maps, and then that'll unlock this, and then basically Bob's your uncle. Also, this will probably be made easier in the new Atlas tree, so we'll see how we go with that as well. Body armor. So this Val Regalia, it's just a lot of maximum health to push your health pool up, and a lot of ES and resistances. That's pretty much it. To be honest with you, you can probably essence craft this or fossil craft it with pristine fossils. So, and pristine and defense fossils, whatever the defense fossils are called again. So yeah, that's pretty achievable. Gloves, this is basically just attribute gloves. Like I was saying, like, you just need to balance attributes in this build. This will be pretty easy to get. Really, you should probably look at getting more ES as well, but you know, this is a league starter build, so pretty simple. Boots, same thing. These are literally just high armor boots, resistance, movement. there's no craft even on here for HP, to be honest with you. So, you know, this can be way better and push your HP pool up even further. Amulet, because of the changes to influences, this does say Redeemer Influence, but the +1 to level of all attribute, or I think is it suffix or prefix? I think it's suffix. Suffix is actually going to be available in the global crafting pool moving forwards, from my understanding of the sort of breakdown in the reveal video. So you pretty much just want like straight flat damage over time, cold dot if you can get it, and HP and level of cold skills. Now, I haven't anointed this. You can pretty much do whatever you want to anoint this. Like you could get, was it Sanctum of Thought. This will give you increased ES armor, which is going to benefit you when you block, and is also going to give you 30% reduced crit damage from critical strikes. But entirely up to you how you want to play the game. So I'm going to leave that open for your own decision making. You could push it into DPS. This tree's pretty forgiving. Rings are a little bit sort of more up there with these, but really you don't need a lot of these attributes. So like light radius, mana, you don't need that. Accuracy, you definitely don't need that on this type of build. Do you need to spare? Sort of not really though. It does synergize with the Ascendancy, but you know, you could get away without it. Same with this one here. Same sort of situation. I think this is actually doubled up. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, Frostbite on hit. Again, don't really need it. Yeah, you can get that out with the actual gem setups, which we'll talk about soon. I'm pretty sure I have put Frostbite into the build as well. It just sort of synergizes with the Ascendancy to have 2 curses on enemies, but you know, you can get away without it if you can't sort of afford a ring like this at the very start. That being said, you know, this is nowhere near the type of ring that you're going to end in the end game with. This is just a really crude ring that, you know, you could probably craft really quickly as well. Belt, same thing here. Like, this is just a heavy belt. Like, it's a trash belt. It's nothing special. You can do way better. So do way better. Outside of that, flasks, sulfur, divine flask for life. It's really basic flask. Like, you can get a way better flask than this. Eternal, I would recommend over a divine any day. Rumi's concoction. This will help you get your block for spell block up to max block. Quartz flask. This will give you phasing. If you can get these with gain charges on hit, as you block, it will generate charges, and then you basically set them up to trigger when charges hit full. So you craft that mod onto your flasks, and you basically have a you have a mage belt without the mage's belt, or whatever it's called, mage blood. Sorry. So yeah, that's pretty much how you get around that, and then you're pretty much infinitely moving wherever you want to go without, you know, as you get hit, you generate flask charges, which means when you're taking out bosses, hell of a lot easier. This build will also be able to do delve as well. So because it's got high armor and max block, and does plenty of dots, so you'll be able to push delve pretty good. So that's a currency generation option as well with this particular build. And then just a quicksilver flask, like, and as you hit, or as you get hit, as you block hits, you'll generate flask charges, and that'll automatically trigger when the flask charges hit full. So you pretty much have quicksilver flask up, you know, almost 24/7. And then there's just like one really basic Viridian jewel in this, just for good measure. Do you need this jewel? No. It's not a you know, backbreaker. It's only affecting 10,000 DPS, and this jewel, quite frankly, is pretty crap. So yeah, we're getting to 550k with huge defensiveness, with very minimal amounts of effort from the itemization perspective. All right, skills. Just in your first weapon, Flame Dash and Arcane Surge, that means you're going to have Arcane Surge active. That increases your mana regeneration and gives you more spell damage, so that's really useful. Don't really need Val Cold Snap, but you can just use normal Cold Snap instead. Then Bone Chill, Control Destruction. Now, you don't need Inspiration. You can use anything else. Only use Inspiration if you're going to use Inspiration on the chest, is probably what I'd say. And actually, what we might actually do is we'll do exactly that. Instead of running Empower, we'll run Inspiration, because you get like 526k. Now, the synergy of Inspiration is if you generate Inspiration with one skill and both skills have Inspiration attached to them, they'll both benefit from the Inspiration modifier, which is increased, I think it's increased crit and increased elemental damage. If you didn't have inspiration in the chest and you were generating inspiration from the use of Cold Snap, then you're just not going to be able to synergize and get the DPS out of that. Now, the other thing to also bear in mind too, Cold Snap, when enemies die within the Cold Snap zone, that allows you to generate frenzy charges, which you really want to do. This is going to increase your movement speed and give you a lot more mapping capability. So just something else to keep in mind when you're running this build. Cold Snap is pretty much vital. Now, you could also add, other things into this build like, Creeping Frost, which is going to increase your dot damage even more. But again, just entirely up to you how you want to play. You can look up alternate builds and mix and match. This build is really forgiving, but Creeping Frost will synergize with this really well. Next, we've just got a cast and damage take and Molten Shell setup. Pretty self-explanatory. As you get hit, you generate Molten Shell, and that'll increase your armor. And then if your armor's higher, that means when you block, you'll get more ES back with your Aegis Aurora. 3 auras on this, so Determination, Tempest Shield, which means you cannot be shocked, which is really good. Shock immunity is a fantastic ability to have. And then this will cap out your spell block so that you get the Glancing Blow proc, you'll get 50% spell block, and then that'll synergize with whatever other spell block that you've got in the tree. So you can get the max block. And then we're running Hatred. Obviously, we're doing cold damage. You could run Malevolence, and if you want to get a Watcher's Eye that buffs up Malevolence or health regen or health and ES regen with Malevolence, then you can also do that. But yeah, that's pretty much it for auras. We're running an Arcanist brand setup that does Frostbomb and Elemental Weakness. Now, you could actually do this with Elemental Weakness and Despair if you wanted to, and then just run Frostbomb manually. Entirely up to you. This is just going to apply cold exposure, and then obviously Elemental Weakness is going to increase your damage as well. Then we've got Vortex, which is going to be running your chest, which is Vortex, Elemental Focus, Control Destruction, Swift Affliction, Hypothermia, and Inspiration. Now, these are all 0 quality and level 20, and no Awakens. Because this is League Starter, we can't be putting shit like Awaken Gems into this, especially because we're going to assume we haven't killed Maven yet. We're just sort of leveling through T12 maps, and this is achievable with T12 maps. Maybe not the Crown of the Inward Eye, but you'll probably be able to pick that up for dirt cheap anyway. So that's pretty much it for the gearing. I think, yeah, we'll go on to the next section. So I nearly forgot this part from the actual Ascendancy as well. So you want to go to Void Beacon first, then you're going to pick up Frigid Wake, then you'll pick up Profane Bloom, and then you pick up Malediction. So Profane Bloom is really important with this build. That's what gives it really good clear speed. So basically, as you're cursing enemies, and that's why you sort of want to have a curse on hit skill, but if you don't have curse on hit, you can do it with the Arcanist brand, sorry. But basically, enemies will just explode all around you and be like that in chaos damage. And yeah, that's pretty much how you deal with clear speed with this build. But that's the Ascendancy sequence. So all right. So once you farm the end game a little bit and you've gotten a bit bored, then once you get to like level 91, give or take, you're going to switch to Giga-tanking, where you're going to go not low life, CIES, which basically means you're chaos immune. We're overcapped in resistances, we have max block, and we do about 1.24 mil dot. Now, this isn't the highest amount of dot, but this is definitely one of the highest amount of defense levels in any build that I've played. We're looking at about 43,000 armor, and yeah, pretty much high levels of ES regen. I think the ES trigger rate as well for regen is really short. It's got a short fuse on it, and we also use Wicked Ward as well to sort of amp that up. I'm not going to go into any real detail in this tree because this is like pure endgame, and I was like face tanking Cyrus with this without even thinking about it. Just sort of sit back and do nothing and let Vortex just kill Cyrus. But what I will do is I will put a link to the full build guide that I did on this particular build. This hasn't changed in 3.17. This has actually gotten more powerful in 3.17. And Aegis Aurora, funnily enough, did not get touched by GGG, which I find completely surprising because everybody was abusing that shield last league. Then the only other trade-off is it might be really expensive this coming league. But anyway, we'll see how we go. Okay, so I know this sort of league starter build guide is not as fancy as some other guides that are out there. and I'll try and do some fancy editing on this one tonight. But yeah, anyway, I hope this sort of helps you start with Vortex. I'm going to do a full RF guide because I'm going to be league starting with RF myself. But yeah, pretty much this is as comprehensive as it gets to starting with Vortex. It's such an easy skill to play. Like, and you guys would have seen the streams last league that I was playing and the videos I put up last league as well. It was super powerful, super tanky. If you want more damage, you can probably get up to 3-4 mil easily with low life. If you're okay with taking a little longer to kill bosses, then definitely the CI version is a really good avenue to go. My CI version is not like full-on mirror tier optimum either. My CI version was relatively cheap comparatively, like 50-60 exalt, something like that by the end, which doesn't seem like it was really worth it for the amount of DPS that it does. Some people are going to blow smoke in my direction, and I'll just honestly say I really don't give a shit. I was able to farm everything in endgame pretty easily with that, with the exception of I think the Crystal King, and that's just because I'm impatient. But anyway, until next time, I hope you enjoy this video. I hope this helps out for anyone who's going to play Vortex. And like and sub, and have a good one, and bye.